Hi everyone, Mrs. K and I are back for more math. Get pumped. Oh yeah, it's math time. We know you're excited because so are we. So if you just watched the other video, I taught you all about integers. And an integer is what, Mrs. K?
Oh, it's a number and its opposite.
A number and its opposite. Do you remember my little picture? The little
Oh,
yeah, adorable, right? I should
it is.
frame it. I should frame
Yes.
it, put it in the room. That'd be so great. Okay, so I just got done teaching you that, and Mrs. K has even more great stuff to teach you about negative and positive numbers. So I'm gonna pass it over to her. She's got everything that she's gonna teach you ready to roll. So
Okay.
you're up, Mrs. K.
All right. So I just want to make sure that they remember what you taught them in the first lesson. So the first lesson was about graphing integers. And so I have here a number line. It says graph -2 and its opposite. And Mrs. Zimmerman, I know you love math. Can you try to do that?
I love to do math.
You try it while our students try it. So we're going to graph -2 and its opposite. So remember, 0 is not a negative or a positive number. And these were all of our negative numbers. If you remember Mrs. Zimmerman's ship and sea level, these would be the numbers or the things that are below, swimming in the water, below sea level. And then these would be the numbers above the water, like the birds in her picture. All right, it looks like Mrs. Zimmerman's ready. Mrs. Zimmerman, show us your answer.
I got it. Okay, here it is. I grabbed -2, and the very next
Whoa.
No.
Hold everything, Mrs. Zimmerman. I see that you graphed a -2, and I love that about your graph. But -1 is not the opposite of -2. Let's try this again, Mrs. Zimmerman.
Oh, okay.
The opposite. So if we graph -2, Mrs. K is going to do it on hers.
Yes, please.
I'm going to graph it on mine. And then we want the opposite. Well, the opposite would be the +2. So I'm looking at my graph. And Mrs. Zimmerman, will you do it with me, please?
Yes, I'm remembering now. Gosh.
So, you know, when we aren't teaching kids every single day, we forget our math. So this is Mrs. K's, and it matches Mrs. Zimmerman's.
Now I get it. That's
all right. So this makes Mrs. Zimmerman feel much better when we know and we remember what she has taught us. So we know an integer is a number and its opposite. That's positive and negative numbers. The only number that is not an integer, wait for it, is, Mrs. Zimmerman?
Oh,
0. Great. Okay, so today's lesson. I remember that Mrs. Zimmerman said that we use a number line to show integers. So Mrs. Kaltsoulis made a number line here, and I want to make sure you can see it here.
Yep.
I have 2 integers here that I want to compare. That means I want to see where they're at on the number line. I want to know which one's bigger and which one's smaller. So we're going to use an alligator mouth, greater than or less than, to do that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to graph them. So my -1, I know, is to the left of 0, because all numbers as they go left get smaller, and all numbers as they go to the right get bigger. So you can see from my graph, because I remember what Mrs. Zimmerman taught us, I graphed my -1 and my 4. All right, now if we're comparing them, whatever is farthest right is the biggest. And so in this particular example, these 2 numbers, 4 is the biggest number. And so we're going to write our alligator mouth so that it is open to the 4. The 4 is the bigger number because why? Mrs. Zimmerman, why is 4 bigger?
It is the farthest one to the right.
That's right, the farthest one to the right. I
Mhm.
always go for the bigger amount. It's just easier for me. All right. Now, what if a number line is confusing to you? Give me a minute here. I want to draw a new idea for you because we have to have lots of different ways to solve problems because not everybody thinks the same. So let's say Mrs. K is comparing a -2 and a -3. Now, I know in your head you're thinking, oh, I know that one, Mrs. K. Well, let's try it a different way. Let's try using that method that Mrs. Zimmerman suggested. Use a thermometer. We all know that in the middle, we're going to make a 0. And as we go up, Mrs. Zimmerman, what are my numbers going to be, positive or negative?
Positive.
Yeah. All right, so you can see I've got my positive numbers and it looks just like a thermometer. And then what's going to happen when I go below 0?
Negative numbers. We should
Oh my gosh, I'm so
all
glad you're
be.
here to help me.
I know we should be.
It's tough talking and writing at the same time.
I
So
feel
let's
you.
go back to our problem. We are going to compare a -3 and a -2. So I'm going to turn my board and I'm going to graph -2, which is right here, and -3. Now, if you're thinking about a thermometer, the bigger number is going to be on the top or on the bottom, Mrs. Zimmerman?
The bigger number is going to be on top.
That's right. So if I'm thinking about a thermometer, if that's easier for you, just like it gets warmer as it goes to the top, it also gets bigger. And so I know it's really strange, but a -2 is really bigger than a -3. So on my board, I would put my alligator mouth open to the -2. Now there's one more way for me to think about this. Let's say Mrs. K was comparing a negative, I'm writing it on my board for you, compare one more way, a -11 and a -20. All right, so I've got that problem right up here. And I'm thinking, oh, I am way too lazy and way too tired to write a number line. So another way to think about this is negative numbers can be money you owe somebody, and positive numbers could be numbers that you are amounts that you have in your pocket. So, for instance, this is Mrs. Zimmerman. She owes Mr. Decker $11. I know, he probably bought you lunch.
Probably.
Okay? And this is Mrs. K, and I owe Mr. Decker $20. Now that's because he bought me lunch twice, and I didn't pay him for the last time, so I've got to do that yet. So anyway, I digressed. So here we have Mrs. Zimmerman owing 11 and Mrs. K owing 20. Who has more money in their pocket? Well, who do you think, Mrs. Zimmerman?
I think I do.
You do. And let's explain why.
Yeah.
If Mrs. Zimmerman only owes $11, she's going to have more money to play with to do the things that she wants to do. So she has more in her pocket, and that means that a -11 is more than -20. Poor Mrs. K, she owes $20 to Mr. Decker, and that might be all the money I have. And that means I have less money to do something fun with. So when you're thinking of comparing integers, there are 3 ways you can do it. You can draw a horizontal number line, like that. You can draw a vertical number line, like this, and pretend it's a thermometer. Or you can pretend you're talking money. Let's do one more, thinking about money. Let's compare $5 and a -8. Now this time, Mrs. K has $5 in her purse. And Mrs. Zimmerman, doggone it, you still haven't paid Mr. Decker yet for
Darn
the
it.
lunch. Well, anyway, who has more money? Which number would be bigger? Well, Mrs. Zimmerman, even though 8 is a bigger number, it's -8. And negative means she owes somebody that money. And Mrs. K has a +5. That means that she actually has $5 in her purse and she owes no one. So if we have to figure out which one's bigger, we're going to say this time Mrs. K has more money than Mrs. Zimmerman. Well, Mrs. K has a new problem for you. I am going to show you how to order integers. And ordering means that we're going to put them in order. Let's see. Let's go from least to greatest. I'm just writing this down so I don't forget it. Least to greatest. Well, least is smallest number to biggest number. So I'm going to show you that by doing it on our number line again. All right. So my numbers are, I better write them in here. We're gonna compare -7, 2, 6, -4, and 3. Mrs. Zimmerman, will you put your board up, and as we figure out our answers, you can record them?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Ready.
I don't want you to write anything yet, Mrs. Zimmerman. We
Okay.
have to graph our points first.
All right.
So, class, we have -7. And I'm looking at my number line, and I don't see a -7, but I see a -6 and a -8. So we know 7 would go right in the middle. So I'm going to draw a big bowling ball there so you can see it on the screen. Okay, our next number is 2. Now 2, we know, is a positive number, so it's going to be to the right of 0. So here's 2. We've got a number there. That's easy. Our next number is 6. 6 is also a positive number, and we have a number for that on our number line. So we're going to put our bowling ball there. -4 is our next number, and we have a number on our number line. Remember, negatives are to the left of 0. And then we have 3. And we don't have any 3, but we do have a 2. And we do have a +4, and we know 3 is halfway between them. So we'll put that. Now, Mrs. Zimmerman, this is where I need your help.
All right.
We have to figure out which number is the smallest, because remember, we're ordering from least to greatest. So, Mrs. Zimmerman, which point on our number line is to the farthest left?
The farthest left. -7.
Write that down, please.
All right.
And we put commas between our numbers so we don't think it's 7 and another number.
Good
All
idea.
right, let's go in order. So we got -7. Let's keep going. The next one is?
Right there, -4.
All right, write that down.
Okay.
Mrs. K's going to keep moving her finger. And then I get to?
2.
All right. Oh, shoot, I forgot this one. It doesn't have a number here.
Oh, yeah, don't forget 3.
Right, it's in between 2 and 4, so 3. And the last one is?
6.
Mrs. Zimmerman, when you get done writing that answer, will you please show us your work?
Absolutely, except I got to redo my 6. It was just terrible. Okay, now you should be able to read it.
Love it. Least to greatest. Now, what confuses people, will you point to the -7 and the -4? Yeah, that's what's confusing, because people think because 7 as a positive number is bigger than 4, that it's bigger, but it's not. Remember, we owe money. So if you owe somebody $7, you have no money, plus you owe people money. So it's kind of a different thing to think about. All right, shall we try another?
Absolutely.
All right, so Mrs. K drew her problem down here. So here are my numbers that I have to put in order. All right. And we're going to go least to greatest. That's going to be our answer this time. So we're going to go ahead and start with -4. -4, remember, is to the left of 0. So here's 0, and we go and, oh, by golly, we got that. All right. Next number is a -2. And this is an integer, remember, because it is a negative number. And then we have a -3. Boy, we've got lots of negative numbers. And then we've got 2, and we've got 1. All right. Now, Mrs. Zimmerman, we want to put these numbers from least to greatest.
Okay.
So are we going to start on the left, or are we going to start on the right?
We're going to start on the left.
All right. So
Because
what's the first number you see?
the first number I see is -4.
All right.
Okay.
What's next?
And then I see -3.
Awesome.
Right next to that is -2.
Sure.
And then there's no dots on the next 2, so I don't have to write them, right?
Right.
Okay, so then I'll write 1 is next, and then 2. All right, check it out.
I love it. Least to greatest. Now, I've got a challenge problem for you, Mrs. Zimmerman.
Ooh, I love those. Okay.
Could you order these now from greatest to least?
Ooh,
I'll
the
give you a
same-
minute while I change my instructions.
absolutely. The same numbers.
Same numbers. So we're going to keep our same graph.
Yeah.
Greatest to least. So if we're doing this right, are we going to start on the left side again? Think about
No.
it, class. Think about it. Are we going to start on the left or the right when we order these numbers? Well, we want the greatest number, and the farther you go right on a number line, the greater the number. Oh, wow. Now let's check her answer. So she has 2. We're starting on the right. 1, -2, -3, -4. You did an awesome job. Yay! Woohoo! All right. I love it. Now, positive numbers and negative numbers. I want to talk about this for just a moment. I'm going to write a true-false question on my board. So, Mrs. Zimmerman, while I'm writing, can you tell your classes how your fish are doing?
Mrs. K, I'm so glad you asked. I'm
Well,
sure
you know, I've been asking you, but the kids don't know, so
Nobody
you better
knows.
fill them in.
Okay, so we've been out of school for a little while, and I decided maybe like a week and a half ago, it was time to bring my fish home. Because you guys know I go feed them on the weekends, but it doesn't really make sense to bring them home to feed them to go to the school every day. I got my tank all set up. It's in Thomas's room. Those of you in Mrs. K's class, Thomas is 4. He's my son, and it is now his job to feed the fish. Every morning, he loves to do it. So honestly, you guys, our fish are in great hands. Thomas and Henry check on them almost every time they go up into their room. So I'm really glad you asked, Mrs. K, because they're doing well.
I know, but you do have to remember that your fish are not going to be nearly as smart because they're not getting your math lessons every day. But that's okay.
True.
All right, class. So I have one true-false question for you.
Ooh.
It says positive integers are always greater than its opposite. So I want you to think of positive numbers. So the positive number I'm going to think of is $5, because remember, that's what I have in my pocket, in my purse. So $5 are always greater than its opposite. So what's the opposite of $5, Mrs. Zimmerman?
-$5.
-5. So would that be a true statement that that positive integer is larger or greater than its opposite? True.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's one problem. Let's think of another example to make sure that our hypothesis is right. So let me see. Mrs. Zimmerman, let's say that you paid Mr. Decker his $8 back, and you have another $8 in your purse because you're ready for your next Jimmy John's lunch. So she has $8 in her purse. So $8 would be a positive integer.
Yep.
And its opposite would be
Negative $8.
oh, -8. Oh, back to owing Mr. Decker again.
Dang it.
Okay. So is it true that the 8 would be bigger than the -8? Yeah, it would.
Mm-hmm.
So we would say that this is a true statement, that positive integers are always greater than its opposite. Okay? And when you think of a number line, remember that numbers to the left of 0 are negative. I'm going to draw it here for you. Here's our number line. Remember, when you go left, you get smaller, and when you go right, you get bigger. And if that's confusing, remember, change it to a thermometer. And if it's easier to think about it owing money and having money, you can use that technique too. So Mrs. Zimmerman and I have a fun activity for you to do that doesn't involve writing. You can get onto the internet and do it. And so we wish you well. And remember, we miss you, and we miss our students laughing at our corny jokes and visiting with our fish and such. And we hope that if you get lonely or you don't understand, just remember, pull us up again and watch us over.
Over and over and over.